When institutions say be more visible, what are they really asking for? Is it confidence or performance? Is it competence or a certain kind of voice that the room rewards? Today on Reading the World, قراءة العالم, joined by Serena Low, Melbourne-based coach and founder of the Visible Introvert Academy, to unpack the hidden rules of extrovert-biased spaces, meetings, networking, leadership norms, and how introverted high achievers can make an impact without acting extroverted. We start with Serena's Plan A stopped working, and we end with practical ways to be heard that don't require becoming someone else. Welcome to Reading the World, قراءة العالم. I'm Ali Al-Haji. On this show, we read institutions and culture the way we read texts, paying attention to language, power, and the stories that shape what counts as legitimate, what counts as confidence, and ultimately whose voice gets heard. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome, everyone. Today's episode is about a world that shows up everywhere, especially in professional life, and it's the word visibility, because be more visible sounds like advice, but it's often a demand shaped by norms, how people speak in meetings, how they claim credit, how they signal authority, and how conversation gets mistaken for competence. My guest today is Serena Low, an ex lawyer and trauma informed coach based in Melbourne, Australia. Serena specializes in helping introverts and quiet achievers thrive in an extrovert biased culture, becoming visible, speaking with authority, and leading effectively without having to act loud or outgoing. She is also the founder of the Visible Introvert Academy. Serena, welcome to Reading the World.
Thank you so much, Ali, for having me here.
Before we jump in, if I say institutions today, I mean workplaces, but also universities and knowledge environments, committees, conferences, seminars, anywhere there are unspoken rules about voice and legitimacy. Here is what I want listeners to leave with today: a clearer definition of what visibility is actually code for, a few hidden rules that shape whose voice is heard, and practical ways to influence rooms without becoming a louder version of yourself. Serena, I'd like to start with a story, because a story is where the abstract becomes real. When you say Plan A stopped working, what happened? What was the moment or season where you realized the identity we're living inside no longer fit?
That's a great question, Ali, to start with. So, to give your listeners some context, I need to explain that in my traditional Chinese culture, Asian culture, we have all these unspoken rules about what you can be and what you can't be. And when it comes to children, from a very young age, we have this idea that we have to do really well in school. We have to then get into university, get into a really good course, graduate, get a good job, get married, have a family. So there's a certain order in which life proceeds. And when you follow that path and you make your family proud, that is a good thing. You get praised, you get complimented, you are told you're a good girl, you're a good boy. But when someone wants to explore outside of that, wants to deviate, wants to maybe consider alternatives, it becomes a little bit gray. And that, of course, depends on what kind of family you come from. I happen to come from one that's very traditional and has very set ideas of what you can and can't be, and what careers are better and what are not so encouraged. So I was a lawyer for 11 years. And in my 11th year, in the middle of a work meeting, my senior asked me and my colleague this question. He said, "Have you thought about where you will be 30 years from now if you continue on this path?" Now, up till that point, I had been very, very happy to just go to work every day and not think about too much about the future. I thought, well, I'm going to be a lawyer for the rest of my life. Nothing to think about, no need to consider other options. But when he asked that question, immediately my imagination went forward, 30 years to the point where usually people retire, and then you're looking back on your career and thinking about what have I accomplished so far. And to me, it suddenly became a moment of, my goodness, I never once thought of going outside the law to ask what else is out there in the whole wide world for me to explore. I never thought of any plan B. I just thought I will stick to the script, I will do this thing, I will keep going till I retire, and that's that. So when that question was asked, it started me on this path of thinking and thinking about it, considering the possibilities, I wonder, and just getting curious. And that was the beginning of me starting to consider the possibilities and going down the path. And eventually, a few other things happened, and I decided that I was at this point where I have to make a decision. Either I keep going and I stick to that path, or I need to find out what else is out there. And I know that the longer I postpone the decision, the harder it will be to actually explore, because as we get older, we tend to get set in our ways and our habits, and it becomes riskier to try something new. So I thought, well, here I am. I've given it a good go for 11 years. It's time for me to find out. So that was, to answer your question in the shortest way possible, that was how it began.
Very interesting. Very great story. I'm hearing two things here. There is the personal decision, and then there is the institutional script, the story of what success should look like, and that leads us directly into visibility. Let's define the word. When a manager or a system says you need to be more visible, what are they really asking for? Is it output? Is it presence? Is it self promotion? Is it narrative control?
To answer your question, it so happens that I work with introverted women in the professional positions who are looking for advancement. And what they tell me is that the feedback they always get at performance appraisal time is, you are a great worker. We acknowledge that. You're very highly skilled, very reliable, but you are lacking in a few areas. So you're lacking in executive presence, you're lacking strategic communication skills, and you're lacking in leadership skills. So basically what the institution is trying to say is, you need to perform visibility in a certain way. We need you to demonstrate that you can lead people, that you're not just good at your work, but also that you're able to delegate, you're able to speak up in meetings, especially high stakes meetings, you're able to shape policy and not wait for permission. But the problem is that quiet achievers are usually that way because they have this very strong work ethic. It's to do with perfectionism, it's to do with accuracy, it's to do with excellence. And for them, excellence has to be at least 100%, meaning that if it's not 100%, it's not good enough. So if I think my team is not doing a great job, I need to step in and I need to cover up for them. I need to fill in the gaps for them. I need to make it such that the whole thing that's presented to management is 100% at least. And that's where the quiet achiever burns out, constantly trying to compensate for somebody else's output.
I want to underline something for listeners. Visibility isn't just about being seen, it's about being recognized. And recognition is social, it's linguistic, it's political. What do you think visibility is being confused with, especially for introverts?
I think there is also the issue of different personalities and how we subjectively interpret what it means to be in charge of the narrative. In an extrovert bias culture, what often happens is the loudest voices dominate the conversation. So you might find that the same few people keep saying the same things, and everybody listens to them or puts them on a pedestal or agrees and nods along with them because those are the same people that always speak loudly, very confidently. So they perform extroversion, and that becomes seen as competency and visibility. But when we actually listen to what someone is saying, sometimes we may think that person may be very confident, but they're not very right. Actually, I find an issue with what they just said. I don't agree with them. But the problem is that with the quiet achiever, they are the opposite. They spend a lot of time thinking and processing. So there's a lot of thinking going on in the brain. And when they are not saying anything and you think that they're not contributing, they're actually actively processing, but they're not articulating. So they like to take a step back, observe what's going on, listen very carefully to everything that's been said, and then they formulate something in their mind. But the problem is sometimes meetings go so quickly and the agenda moves so quickly that there is no opportunity for that quiet person to speak, or they just can't find the right timing. And by the time they're ready to articulate, the conversation has already moved on. And so then what happens is the team misses out on their input.
Can we give listeners a quick diagnostic? If someone is told to be more visible, what are two or three questions they can ask to decode what visibility means in their institution?
I think even the fact that they're asking that question shows great self-awareness and self-empowerment, because a lot of quiet achievers assume that their problem is them, that there's something wrong with them, they're not loud enough, not confident enough, and so on. But what you just said is very illuminating, because that is the first thing to ask. According to your rubric or your requirements, what do you define visibility as? And listen to what the interviewer or the management team thinks visibility is, because it could be two very different things. And so then after listening, if you know then what that visibility looks like, you can then ask some questions, interrogate the assumptions yourself. Is that valid? And have examples to show of where in your path or your day to day you have already demonstrated visibility, but in a different way. Because sometimes organizations get very fixated that visibility looks like one thing or one model of leadership. But actually, there are various models. And we know that with quieter leaders, there are often other advantages which are undervalued. For instance, the power of listening, of creating psychological safety, of presence, and of making it that spaciousness for other voices to be heard. So that kind of leadership is a different sort. It doesn't look visible in a sense that it is not loud, it is not out there, but it is very effective because it builds trust.
Let's talk about high stakes rooms, meetings, leadership, conversations, decision moments. If a meeting is a text we can read, what are the hidden rules that decide whose contributions land as leadership versus whose contributions disappear?
It depends very much on the values as well as who's in charge of the narrative at that organization. So you may have a team that very much embraces, let's say, the hero model of leadership, where they like someone who is up there, out there, leading from the front. So if you have that kind of a model of leadership, then it's difficult. It is more difficult for a quieter style of leadership to be accepted, but it can be done over time. You just have to demonstrate the value of that and keep communicating it. So the problem with the quiet achiever is sometimes that there is a gap in communication, meaning that they have all the knowledge in their head, they know what they're doing, they have all the expertise, but they're not necessarily speaking it out. They're not sharing ideas openly. They are not articulating as much as they could. They are not keeping people updated on progress. And so, in the absence of that, others might assume nothing's being done.
What are common speech patterns that get rewarded? For example, certainty over nuance, speed over thoughtfulness.
Those are definitely two of them, and loudness as well. People assume that the louder you are, the more confident you are, and the more you must know what you're talking about. But when you actually make room and when you slow down for more voices to be included, then you get to hear a diversity of opinions, and you allow people who are slower thinkers because they are deep thinkers to have time to formulate their ideas. And when they actually do speak, you realize, oh my goodness, that is so true, or that is so wise, or that is so insightful. But you have to make room for those other voices too.
What happens when humility is misread as a lack of confidence?
Then what happens is you tend to overlook those quietly powerful leaders or quietly talented leaders who are perhaps more modest. They don't put themselves out there. And then this could lead to a misperception that they are not confident, or they don't know what they're talking about, or that they are not up to speed with what's happening. That is actually a misreading. That is a misdiagnosis.
I want to be careful here. It's not introverts good, extroverts bad. It's that many institutions are extrovert biased. They confuse performative confidence with competence. What do introverts often do well in these rooms that doesn't get rewarded unless they translate it into the room's language?
What introverts do really well is that they are excellent listeners. At a time when the world is a bit complex, very chaotic, very uncertain, we need people who have that calm, steadying presence, who can walk into a crisis and lead without getting hysterical, without getting swept away by the drama, who can actually give instructions in a calm, competent way with the reasoning to support it, and people actually gravitate towards that kind of leadership. because nobody wants to be swept along by someone who doesn't know what they're doing, but then carries that kind of high level of negative, frantic energy. That's not good for the organization, and it's not good for the employees' well-being.
Let's move from reading the room to changing outcomes without self betrayal. If an introverted high achiever wants to be more visible without performing extroversion, what are a few concrete practices you recommend?
The first thing is to reframe your mindset. So instead of thinking there's a problem with me, look at the system. How is the system not supporting the quiet voices? And what can I do to contribute to change the energy in the room? What can I do to use more of my quiet strengths? So if I'm going into that kind of a space, I would be looking for opportunities to have more one-on-one conversations, because that's where introverts really thrive. Just having that direct connection, or one to a small group, because anything that is too many people will be overstimulating for the introvert. So focus on what you know you're already naturally strong at.
If a listener only does one thing this week, one small change, what would you recommend they try?
I would recommend that they start with their internal why, as in to understand what is the purpose that they want to communicate. What is the reason that is important for them to speak up? Is it for their own career promotion, or is it to advocate on behalf of the team? Is it to help the project move along? Is it to meet the organization's goals? Whatever that thing is, or is it to serve the customer better? Whatever that motivation is, focus on that, because then that way you take the pressure off yourself. It's no longer about performance. It's actually about collectively helping everyone to achieve the common goal, and that there's a higher good involved.
Imposter syndrome comes up a lot, especially in prestige environments. How do you think about imposter feelings? What's internal psychology? And what's a realistic response to being in a system that signals you don't belong?
I think the traditional understanding of imposter syndrome is that it is a bad thing because it means I'm comparing myself unfavorably to the other people around me in the room. And I'm saying they are better and I'm not as good as. Therefore, I feel inferior. I feel like an imposter and I don't belong. I want to invite your listeners to look at it differently. A lot of times with a quiet achiever, their imposter syndrome is because they care too much, meaning they want to do a really good job. They want to do 100%. They want to give their best. They want to share their talent and their knowledge and their expertise in a way that's good for everyone. And they feel that they're not good enough because they can always improve, because they can always check the slides one more time, polish, make it better, put in more data, research, add in more things. And so they're coming from a place of, I want to do a really good job. And that's why I don't feel I'm good enough, because I know I can still do better. So when you think about it from that point of view, then imposter syndrome is not necessarily a bad thing. Everyone, even the most successful people, have imposter syndrome at some kind of level. So the question is not, do I have imposter syndrome and how do I overcome it? It's more, if I care so much, well, that's actually a good thing. Now, how do I manage that so I don't burn out? So I don't make it at the cost of something like my health or my well-being, and I'm not putting undue pressure on my team. So it's about balance. It's about bringing it back to how do we all do a good job, but also have a good life.
Thank you for that great answer. Let's touch networking and sales, words that make many introverts tense. How can an introvert build relationships and opportunities without feeling like they are acting or performing a persona?
When we say those words, sales and networking, the reason we have a certain reaction to them or get triggered by them is because we assume they mean something bad. But if I tell you that sales is the same as service, if I tell you networking is the same as connection, then you will feel differently about sales and networking. So traditionally, we think it's about going out to bother people, to make them do things they don't want to do. But what if I say that it is by telling you, it's about listening to you, finding out what your problem is, and helping you find a solution to that. And then therefore, I'm offering you a service. And that is the sales process. And if I'm networking and I met you at a networking event, what is the purpose of that event? It's for people to connect so that they can collaborate and help each other. So if I'm there, my thinking would be, how can I be of service in this situation? How can I support you in your business this week? What can I do to open a door for you somewhere? So if I go in with that kind of attitude, then I'm no longer triggered. by the word sales or by the word networking.
One of the themes you talk about is reinvention after 40. When someone has invested years into a path and then feels uncertain, if you read that moment as a story problem, not a failure, what's the first rewrite? What's the first new sentence in the narrative?
When you look at it from the point of view of a story has chapters. So reinventing yourself is simply writing a new chapter. What I'm saying is the story is not over yet. Just because you encountered this wake up call, or you came to this crossroads, or you had to make a difficult decision, or because loss or an accident happened to you, that's not the end of the story. That's actually the turning point. That is the cliffhanger. So there is something else that comes after that. What do I want to make this mean? And who do I want to be in this situation? And when I look back at this incident in 10 years' time, how do I want to feel about myself? If I want to feel proud of myself when I look back, then I need to be writing a different kind of story right now in response to that. So whether I'm 40, whether it's moving to another country, whether it's going through maybe a pregnancy loss, maybe it's going through a relationship breakup, all those things are chapters in the story. And you get to be the author of your own life story by writing another chapter.
What would you say to the listener who thinks, I should be grateful, but I feel stuck? How do they begin without needing a perfect plan B?
I sometimes think this plan B is overrated, Ali. I think what we actually need in these times is agility, the ability to adapt, to respond to life as it presents itself, to accept what is in this moment instead of feeling I'm a victim, I'm powerless, I'm helpless, I can't do anything. I think we always do have a choice. In very limited circumstances, perhaps we don't, but most of us do have a choice to choose differently. And so, if we can have that kind of a thinking or mindset that I do have a choice, I can make different choices right now, and therefore I can create a different ripple effect for my life or maybe on the people around me by choosing and thinking differently, then I think we will all have a very different outcome.
On this show, I like to ask a question that connects back to the title, Reading the World. Is there a book, essay, poem, or even a concept, something you have read that helped you understand voice, identity, or power in institutions?
One of the ones that I just read recently is called Power versus Force. It's by Dr. David Hawkins. And in it, he has a map of consciousness, which tells us how, depending on the thoughts that preoccupy our minds, we can either be a more conscious kind of person, human being, and therefore contribute to the enlightenment of the world. Or if we are constantly fixated on pride, on anger, on resentment, on unforgiveness, we are actually lowering our conscious level. And that affects the people around us too. So I think if we look at the state of the world right now, I think it gives me hope because each of us has a responsibility as well as a moral duty to be that kind of a person that actually contributes to making the world a better place.
Thank you very much for that answer. To close, what's one sentence you would want a quiet achiever to carry into their next high stakes room?
I would say, remember that you are already strong. You already have many remarkable gifts. Start using them and start sharing them with the world because the world needs your quiet voice.
Serena, where can people find you and your work?
The best place would be on my website. It's serenalow.com.au.
Serena, thank you for this conversation, for the depth and the clarity. And to everyone listening, if this episode resonated, share it with someone who is being told to be more visible, especially someone who is brilliant but quiet. You can follow Reading the World, قراءة العالم, whenever you listen. And if you want to support the show, leaving a rating or a short review helps more than you think. Until next time, take care. And as always, read slowly, listen carefully, and avoid the shortcut.